Forgive Me Father 2 was an FPS I was all over back in 2023, having reviewed its initial early access release. I liked it quite a bit. While a straightforward sequel, I felt its developer Byte Barrel had improved on the original in just about every way. Sadly, when 2024 rolled around and FMF2 hit its 1.0 version, I was unable to review it as I was crunching on another project outside of this channel, and simply didn't have the time. Which, believe me, was frustrating. Frustrating year all around, quite frankly. And now it's 2025, and just in time for the spooky season, I'm ready to lend my final thoughts on this Lovecraftian SPLAT-fest. Better late than never. However, to sweeten the pot here, FMF2 recently released on consoles, and its publisher Fulqrum was kind enough to provide me with a copy of the PlayStation 5 version. A big thank you to them. So along with playing through the PC version, I also charged through the PS5 one, and will be touching on that version throughout this video. And with that, let's open our Necronomicon, grab our tentacles, and let the forgiveness begin.
I've finally defeated you! You want to deceive me again with even more lies. I won't give up, and I will uncover the truth.
In Forgive Me Father 2, we once again slip into the robes of the priest, locked away in an insane asylum following the madness he faced in the first game, wrangling with whether the horrors he defeated were real or in his mind.
There's something wrong with this place. That's for sure. Wake up. About darn time.
One night, after being prompted by a voice inside his head, he escapes the asylum and goes on a bloodstained journey to not only come to grips with his prior actions, but also relive the events of his life that brought him to this point. Will the priest find redemption, or will he descend further into madness? Well, that's entirely up to you. It's a compelling plot, largely due to it being saturated in Lovecraftian goodness, a vehicle for insane sights, grotesque body horror, and mental misadventures. To be honest, I can't claim to have understood all of it. The plot can feel rather disjointed, and much of it is up to the player to piece together through letters they receive throughout the game and the priest's own ramblings.
Home, family, and dreams. But weren't they all already dead anyway? Do you really call this mindless routine life?
However, it did keep me entertained due to how it was presented, and I did appreciate the ever-present mystery of whether or not what we're experiencing is real or completely in the priest's head. Although, let's be honest, the narrative is not the star of the show here. Gameplay-wise, FMF2 is old-school boomer shooter through and through. Lots of speed, lots of violence, lots of keys, but most importantly, lots of fun. Oh look, a clock. It's not particularly deep, which wasn't particularly a problem, although it does attempt to lend some depth in a few ways that we'll get to in a bit. The shooting just feels awesome, what I like to describe as simple pleasure fun. Point, shoot, splat. And indeed, this game is a splat-fest, with your beefy, powerful weapons painting the environment with hand-drawn blood, lending a sense of satisfaction that is sure to rain dopamine on the brain like a sprinkler over a lawn. A blood sprinkler. Puppa Combo should name their next game that. Ooh, another clock. It's quite challenging too. You hear this a lot when discussing shooters of this type, but it's all sorts of true in FMF2. You have to be moving constantly because if you pause in the midst of a crowded ambush, which happens often and viciously, you'll be dinged every which way to Sunday by a sea of projectiles. Oh, there are some bullet hell qualities here for sure, and while the projectiles are aggressive in their speed and sheer amount, the fact that they are big, bright, and well telegraphed means you only have yourself to blame if you get hit. Ooh, another clock. However, this does lead to one of my criticisms in that I do think this game would have benefited greatly from a dash mechanic, especially since, on top of the waves of projectiles you have to dodge, there are particular enemies that lock onto you and the only defense is to break their line of sight. Think of them like the snipers from Half-Life. And whenever I was in the most saturated of fights, I often found myself jumping to get out of the way of attacks, which wasn't really helping anything really, and mostly stemmed from desperation. This hardly spoils the meal, but it's a missing ingredient that does diminish the taste a little. Clock! In terms of playing on console, the game felt good on my DualSense controller, if not a bit imprecise. Unfortunately, the game doesn't allow you to tweak your dead zones. That really should be standard these days. Although if you're having trouble, the game does have an aim assist feature. I will say though, its default setting is pretty aggressive. I recommend just a tick. That's all you need. Disappointingly, you can't customize your button layout. The game has 2 presets that are fine. I went with the second one because the first one had me reloading with the circle button, which just feels wrong. Of course, you can customize your buttons on the system level, but again, this should be a standard thing these days. And as far as mouse and keyboard, no complaints there. Still the best way to play these types of games. Haha, clock. The level design is a huge standout. I've made it no secret that I like a lot of variety in my games, especially my shooters, and FMF2's levels provide that in spades. Many either have a distinctive device or angle to them. Like one has you navigating in pitch black darkness, while another has you dodging mortars on the front lines of World War I. Some are more linear and combat focused, others are non-linear with objectives you have to hunt down. Some have a platforming focus, others have more of a puzzle focus. And while there are more straightforward boom shoot maps where it's a big looping key hunt with arena battles, when those come about, it's refreshing and fun. Every map is something different, and it keeps the game from feeling too samey. And the pacing, for the most part, is right on. Many of the maps feel big, but are not overly long, and never overstay their welcome. There's a good balance of quiet, spooky exploration and rocketing, hard-hitting action. A big thing that helps with all of this as well is the wide variety of visuals, which we'll touch on later. A new feature is the Asylum, essentially a hub you can visit in between levels. Here you can access and replay completed levels, each with their own appropriately themed cell, review any story materials you've come across, and partake in a sort of batting cage minigame that I suck at. I really appreciate this inclusion. Maybe it's the part of me that grew up on mascot platformers that featured hubs like this, but I always like a spot where you can take a breather and do some extracurriculars. Plus, there's a lot of fun visual detail squeezed in and some good Easter eggs. Most importantly, here you can buy new weapons and upgrade your character. The first Forgive Me Father featured a simple RPG system where when you leveled up, you could purchase weapon upgrades from a sprawling tree of them, with some of the upgrades transforming weapons into entirely different damage dealers. This did lock out the other options, but lent some replay value as your build could be different with each playthrough. In FMF2, this has been completely thrown out in favor of a straightforward system where by spending purple crystals you collect throughout each level, you can buy any of the weapons at any time and in any order from 6 categories corresponding to your weapon slots: melee, pistol, shotgun, machine gun or rifle, explosive, and exotic. Exotic is basically a miscellaneous slot, as the weapons vary wildly, like a railgun and a good old-fashioned flamethrower. I do wish there was a little more to this. I don't think the RPG system needed to be axed. Sure, it wasn't perfect, I certainly had some issues with it, but I would have liked to see it iterated on. However, I can't deny the benefits of the new system. For starters, you can equip any of these weapons at any time, in the Asylum that is, no longer barred from them like in the first game. And assuming you have all the weapons purchased, you have some good freedom to tweak your build for any given level, strengthened by the fact that there is a decent variety of weapons, with some having attributes of other weapon slots for further flexibility. For example, there's a shotgun that behaves more like a bolt-action rifle, sacrificing spread in favor of range. However, there's a couple pistol types that behave more like shotguns if you don't want to lose the crowd-controlling spread. Although some of the weapon unlocks I personally didn't find that useful. For example, 2 of the melee weapons are meant more for crowd control, like a severed arm that is weak attack-wise but can cause an enemy to explode, and a creature in a box that can blow enemies back to give you room. While I'm sure some players found great use for these, for me they didn't hold a candle to the axe that could instantly splatter any of the low-level enemies. While I was ultimately fine with this simpler system, if we ever get a Forgive Me Father 3, I would like to see Byte Barrel take another crack at the first game's RPG system. I think there's some more juice you can squeeze from it. Now, next to the weapon vendor is the Dark Tome Pages vendor for the new Dark Tome system, replacing the Madness abilities from the first game and incorporating some of the upgrades from the Axed upgrade tree. Charged up by splatting enemies, when activated, the Dark Tome system gives you special buffs for a short period of time, which are chosen by you, purchased from a pool of Dark Tome pages you can buy at the Asylum. Things like faster shooting, health that restores per kill, improvements to your specific weapons, extra attacks against enemies, and there's also passive effects that can help you regardless of it being activated, like being able to carry more ammo or extra health. However, you are limited to only 3 pages at a time, so players have to choose wisely. I do like the idea of the system, and some of the pages were handy in a pinch, but in the long run, I don't know if it felt all that consequential or useful. Many of the benefits felt minor in the midst of battle, and honestly, I had a hard time telling if some of the pages were even doing anything. Plus, while I don't mind starting with 3 page slots, I wish there was a way to expand and have more, because there really are a ton of pages to choose from, and for me, it was way too easy to stick with the ones that felt the most effective and ignore the more unconventional or seemingly less effective ones. In fact, you know those clocks I've been having fun with up to this point? Ooh, there's one right now. Well, every level has an amount of those that you need to find in Smash in order to get 100% completion. Now, while smashing all the clocks will earn you a Steam achievement and unlock some pages for the Dark Tome, there's not much else you get from hunting them down, and I think the devs missed an opportunity to have them play a bigger role with the Dark Tome and weapons systems. For example, what if hunting down a certain amount of clocks unlocks a slot for the Dark Tome, or unlocks upgrades for your weapons, maybe secret weapons entirely, maybe a secret level? I really feel like these should have been treated more as currency. The other thing too is that there's a ton of them. If there were 5 or 6 clocks per level, that would be one thing, but levels can have as little as 10 to as high as 20 clocks. And with such little reward and benefit, hunting them all down can feel like a chore quickly. They might be great for stupid YouTube video gags, but otherwise they're blatant padding. Now back to the Dark Tome, it's a cool idea, but if I had to be harsh, if you took this out of the game, it wouldn't really hurt anything. The visual presentation is outstanding. From a technical perspective, the game is modest. Level architecture is largely blocky with simple polygonal shapes, and models for enemies, props, and your weapons are flat 2D images. But it's the art direction here that makes it shine, as every texture in the game is hand-drawn in a comic book style evocative of artists like Mike Mignola and Frank Miller, early Frank Miller, with thick, inky line work and rich colors with a watercolor texture to them. While I'm sure this was all painted digitally, you can really feel the paper of this game, if that makes sense. Like the first game, enemy designs are inventive, creepy, disgusting, but not without humor, with expressive animations, as well as your weaponry, early to mid-century firearms fused with Lovecraftian creatures, themselves wriggling and writhing with every pull of the trigger and reload. The artistry extends to the models and props, exhibiting a superb level of detail, helping to make each map feel like a tangible place. And I have to shout out the small comic book touches that help all of it feel like a graphic novel come to life, like the text that pops up whenever you get a headshot, the border around your screen that lights up whenever you get a pickup, and the drop-down panel that hints at where to go next. A lot of this, by the way, can be turned off in the menu if it's a distraction. Majority of the levels are simply gorgeous. On top of the detail, there's a huge variety of art on display, lending a distinctive atmosphere for each map, and their differing styles often motivate the inventive level design. The frosting on top, of course, being some decent technical niceties, reflections and dynamic lighting in particular to complete the gloomy feel. They're not all winners. There are sections of some levels that did look a little blah to me. The beginning crypt portion of the cathedral level, for example, felt a little uninspired to me. But to be clear, these are just sections I'm talking about. Majority of each map was visually delectable, and the visuals in the final stretch of maps in the endgame were absolutely jaw-dropping. Audio leaves little to complain about too. The sound design checked my boxes with distinctive enemy grunts, beefy sounding guns, and the whizzing of projectiles going past your ear to give you a jolt. with a soundtrack that goes between spooky, haunting melodies befitting of a Lovecraftian universe, and shredding heavy metal for when the blood really starts to splatter. Now, in terms of the console port, the visuals made the transition to the PlayStation 5 pretty much unscathed, but unfortunately, there are some issues. I found some odd graphical discrepancies, two in fact just in the first level, the hospital. Right off the bat, the floor has a darker tone to it and seems to be lacking some of the reflective qualities of the PC version. Not horrible, just a little weird, likely an error. The funny one though was towards the end of the level when I entered this hallway and found this wooden frame on the ground. I then realized it was the ceiling frame that had somehow dropped. Either this is a bug or the contractor is about to get lit up on Yelp. The big issue though is performance. Throughout my time with this version, the game exhibited lots of hitches and slowdown. In fact, the second level, the port, was one of the worst. Now, the PC version wasn't perfect performance-wise either. There were instances of hitching and slowdown in that version too. Some of the final levels, in fact, exhibited some of the biggest frame drops, but this was minor compared to the PS5 version. And to answer those who are wondering, yes, FMF2 was developed in Unreal Engine 5, although far from the worst performing game I've played using that engine. Looking at you, Oblivion. Now, for the record, I was playing on a standard PlayStation 5. I can't speak to how it performs on the PS5 Pro because I'm not going to spend money on that. But sniffing around the internet, it seems the performance wasn't improved on that system. The Xbox and Switch versions reportedly weren't much better. So overall, not a consistent showing on the console at the moment. But to be clear, the performance issues didn't make the PlayStation 5 version unplayable. I was still enjoying myself throughout it, and some levels performed just fine. For instance, the Trenches level was pretty spotty, and I was certain the following frontline mission would be problematic, due to its explosive mortar sections. But lo and behold, while it wasn't perfect, it performed adequately. Clock. My suspicion is that the slowdown is tied to the fog effects, as the mistier levels were the ones with the most issues, but I can't say for sure. Either way, while both versions need some optimizing, the PC version is far more stable than its console counterpart. Forgive Me Father 2 is a creative and artistically stimulating shooter that is a joy to play. While not all aspects of its gameplay land, it more than makes up for it for inventive level design, tough enemies, and rock-solid shooting, which are the essentials for any great boom shoot. Unfortunately, console players are in for a rockier time with uneven performance. Although if you can forgive the slowdowns and hitches, you'll still have a fun time. Byte Barrel has done a good job evolving their young shooter franchise since its solid first outing, and from here I'm excited at the prospects of them following this up with a third title, or perhaps something fresh entirely. But that's it for me. What are your thoughts on Forgive Me Father 2? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. It's a huge help for the algorithm and getting my videos seen by more people. If you want to join my Discord, the link is down below, along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.